Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience. I realise that there are queues to get into the sessions, which is obviously testament to the quality of the speakers that we have here today, which is
We
great.
have Xboxes outside. I thought that's why you guys were coming.
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them that's a secret. So thank you, everyone, for your patience. I'm not sure if anyone can come in. If you are going to be standing there, could you please make sure you don't block the camera that I'm looking at right over your left shoulder? Yes, that thing on the tripod. Please do not block that. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Needed to catch my good side. I do have one side. By the way, if there's any lip readers from our virtual audience, I did say when I sat down, it's nice to sit down, when you're getting old. My feet are already starting to hurt. Anyway, I digress. So, up next, as you know, we have Sean Jones, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Microsoft. Sean studied chemical engineering at Berkeley and worked at BASF more than 12 years, before stints in senior roles at consultancies, including Accenture and Deloitte. He joined Microsoft in his current role in March and is leading the development of sustainability solutions and ecosystems for customers and partners at Microsoft Germany. Or, in his own words, he says he's helping Microsoft save the world with the heart of a grandfather and the mind of an engineer. So how does that work?
Well, grandfather, I could explain that to you, but it's just obvious.
I think we can get that one.
Get that one too. No, I mean, I approach it, and that was one of the reasons that I came to Microsoft. I think there were kind of two driving factors. One is that, last year, Muzzy Jorgensen, my colleague, she's got my role actually here in the UK, that I was happy to come for her. She couldn't come today, and They've really changed from an internal focus, Microsoft completely, to also developing solutions for clients and helping them solve the sustainability challenges. And in my discussion with Microsoft, I said, okay, so this has become a real engineering problem right now. We need to take a look at the data. We need to understand what are the problems, what are the different opportunities to improve sustainability at a company level and break it down. So that was kind of where the engineering came in. And as a chemical engineer, I always love, for some of you have seen these or probably developed it, these Sankey diagrams about the mass flows of the world, right, of the whole globe every year. And so I'd been looking at in the context of working on projects over the last years in circular economy, and I was like, so this is how we can really start to break the problem down into its, each company and each product within each company. And so that was what excited me about it. And then the other thing that excited me about Microsoft, and I think that's a statement about our strategy, but it should be for every company, is developing that culture of a real interest in sustainability. I think that those companies that are leaders, that are published in your reports too, are the ones where it's really not about strategy only. It's about the fact that there's a driving force within the organization. At Microsoft, there's 10,000 people that form a sustainability community, and they just do all sorts of great stuff too, and organize different events. They're the ones that innovate a lot also on certain measures that we take. So those are kind of the reasons that I was interested in, and the mind of an engineer.
Now, you made that sound really simple, but how does Microsoft incorporate those sustainability principles and practices into everyday operations, but also the culture? Because culture is key to this.
Yeah, I mean, the culture one I have to maybe put off a little bit. I'm just not an expert at how to develop culture. It just existed there, and I think that there was still a lot of halo effect from Bill and Melinda Gates. They were, with their activities, have always been a proponent of social benefits and also sustainability topics too. So I think that was a bit of the core, which led to some big investments in how we tackle as Microsoft the topic of sustainability. So it's not just about carbon, it's carbon, water, and waste. So it's a broader definition, which is aligning more and more with what we see in regulations and clearly with the Sustainability Development Goals. So I think that there was some leadership halo effect that came. But since then, it's really just about people really enjoying the activity and sponsoring it themselves. If you take a look at the concrete program, it's no different than many of you are doing in your companies right now. I mean, we're focused on carbon, right? So we want to become a carbon negative company by 2030. We set those targets already in 2020. We report on that on a yearly basis. But in addition to that, we want to become waste zero. We want to become water positive. Those are topics that are not quite as mature as the carbon. And if we break down carbon, I always find it confusing in our talks about carbon neutral and carbon zero and carbon negative. So I just try to deal with the scopes. If you look at Microsoft's business, it used to be a software company, right? That's probably how you know it all. But it no longer is. It's really a manufacturing company. So most of the stuff that we're doing is building data centers and operating data centers all over the world. And we have hundreds, which are a significant impact on the environment and also carbon emissions. And I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing there. We also produce Xboxes, which I lied. I don't have any with me, actually. Sorry. And Surface laptops and a couple of other things, in addition to the software platforms that we run. So when you take all of that into account, as with most companies, our Scope 3 is the largest part of our carbon emissions. It's over 96%, and the categories 1, 2, and 11 for those of you who are into these things. So basically, your purchased goods, your assets, and then also your sold goods, and how carbon is entrained in those purchased goods and also in the assets that you're building, but as well as the things that you're selling. So that's where most of it is, and I can talk a little bit about how we're kind of breaking down the programs, how we're tackling them, if you want me to.
Yeah, let's do that. I want to talk about data centers, actually, because that's something you mentioned. As you said, Microsoft is very much a data center building business right now. I believe that data centers account for around 3% global emissions.
Yeah, you're right. I've got slightly different numbers in my head, but yeah, it's between 2 or 3 right now, and it's supposed to grow significantly. So I've heard forecasts. We didn't produce them. I think maybe some colleagues in here did, that say that the data center power usage in the future will grow to between 5 and 10% of overall electricity usage, just because everybody's building data centers, not just us, but Google, Amazon, the usual suspects, and also national organizations as well.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk then about how you are, or some examples you can give of some innovative sustainability solutions that you've implemented. So tell us about some of the success stories, if you like, of how you've become more sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing we tackle, and this is the biggest thing I think in general, is just the access to renewable power, right? So we've made power purchase agreements, I think in excess of 13 gigawatts, 120 some different projects over 16 different countries. That's the core, right? Getting access to renewable power. Naturally, we're also redesigning our data centers to be as efficient as they can be. There's this data center term called PUE, power usage efficiency, and it's basically the amount of overall power used divided by the power just for compute. And so if you're at 1.1 or you're really good. We're not quite there, at 1.12, and we're one of the leaders in that. But in order to do that, it's a lot of kind of basic operational things that you would find in any manufacturing environment. We're trying to consolidate more servers into a room, so we build fewer data centers. We're trying to redesign the actual server racks so that they use and are more power efficient in how they do compute. We have the added issue that it's difficult for us to deal with growth. We not only grow as a company about 20% per year, so we're trying to counteract that, but our new product areas like artificial intelligence are extremely power intensive. So you've probably heard in the news a lot about our work with OpenAI. We built the initial computers and NVIDIA chipsets and so forth. So those are very kind of proof of concept, and they work very well, and stuff is running on them, but there's a lot of room to go to make those more efficient. So that's a core part of it. But it's not just about getting access to power and power efficiency, it's also about the physical objects that are in there that have entrained carbon. So we do a lot on redesigning servers so that they've got recycled plastics in them, right? You'd think that, well, that would be obvious, but it isn't today. So there's a lot of virgin plastic that's being used in making all sorts of goods. And then we have kind of what we call Class A data centers, which are the premium ones, the ones that we own and run. But we have so many data centers that we don't own all of them. We run all of them, but we don't own all of them. And for the Class A data centers, we also include things like a circularity center. So it's just basically a warehouse right next to the data center where we're reprocessing all of the server parts so that we can get to really 90% plus reusage of each of those. And we use those circularity centers also for our consumer goods. So we can also have Xboxes shipped there, we can have Surface laptops shipped there, although we're not the major laptop producer in the world. So those are, I think, elements. And then there's crazy stuff that we do. We have a project, I'm forgetting the name of it, it's like Helios or something, where we take a data center, we stick it in a giant steel capsule, and we put it under the North Sea, and we operate it there. And some of you may have heard of it too. Works quite efficiently. Doing maintenance is a bit of a challenge, so we haven't really scaled it up yet. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I think that speaks also to not only Microsoft but our competitors as well. We're really pushing the boundaries of how to do these things right now, and we have to invent a lot of it on our own, so it's not available out there always.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier the fact that you're trying to be, as a company, carbon negative by 2030, and obviously the company is still growing at quite a click, actually. So what are the main challenges that you're encountering to reach that carbon negative position, especially when the company is growing at this rate?
Yeah, it is really challenging. Our first annual report for sustainability was in 2020, and we had about slightly under 13 million tons of carbon equivalent. And then in 2021, it went up a little bit, the overall, scopes 1, 2, and 3 in total. And then in 2022, our most recent reporting year, it went down slightly. So we only reduced 0.5% from 21 to 22, but we did grow as a company 18%. So it was a good effort. But if any of you are managing businesses, you know of the hockey stick effect, and it can be a downwards as well as an upwards one. So our target is really to be carbon negative by 2030. So do the math. We got 8 years from 2022. You would imagine, to get down, to reduce 100%, you'd have to, be at least reducing overall about 10% a year. So we've stepped away a little bit from that commitment purely. We've said, okay, we're going to only, and this includes carbon scopes 1, 2, and 3, reduce about 50% of our emissions by 2030 that we're actually doing carbon in scopes 1, 2, and 3, which still means that we need to, over the course of those 8 years, be doing about 7% a year reduction. We only did 0.5% last year, right? And then we're going to offset the remainder of that with projects. In fact, we're one of the biggest investors in carbon offset programs and technologies in the world. They're very varied, and don't have the complete picture, but doing things from carbon capture to biochar to naturally forestry rebuilding. But we'll only be carbon negative with our plan if we actually take the 50%, so about 7 million tons of carbon equivalent, and offset that with the equivalent amount. And that's our target right now, actually. But we still got to reduce by 7% a year.
Just the 7% a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you break it down. Now, we've talked a lot about Microsoft, and obviously you can't achieve any of these goals without working with other stakeholders and external organizations. And so how does Microsoft collaborate with those stakeholders to really drive these initiatives even more?
Yeah, I mean, we look at our stakeholder group kind of in 3 different areas that is basically the structure of our strategy. So our internal stakeholders, naturally, which we've talked about a lot. So it's really about getting your own house in order, and that's what we've been focusing on for the last 3 years. The second group of stakeholders is really new over the last year, and since Muzzy was here in November to talk about it, and that is the development of software solutions platforms for customers. And it's extremely interesting, not only as a business opportunity for Microsoft, but to understand how other customers are dealing with it, because each company has a slightly different footprint. So we work together naturally to sell products to the customers, but also in collaborative ways in consortia in the European Union, here in the UK, in the United States, in Taiwan, especially in Asia and Singapore. So that's a really big focus of ours, is working together with our customers to understand what sustainability means, and also the challenges they're facing, like renewable energy sourcing. And then the last area is, of course, working with governmental and and non-governmental organizations, to especially define standards, right? We still have, slightly different ways of talking about carbon measurement in certain areas, defining standards in terms of the overall scope of sustainability. The CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is coming out in the European Union and will impact the entire world over the course of the next 4 years, but making sure that we all have a harmonized view on what that data model looks like and what people are trying to do. And we make a lot of investments too. So we have a 1 billion climate fund. Again, I think Muzzy talked about it last year too. We've since invested now over 7 million of it in a lot of these technologies that are interesting for us, primarily as Microsoft. How do we build better data centers, but also general technologies like carbon capture. Fusion nuclear energy, one of our recent investments. So the dream is still there at some point.
Okay, you talked there about, my mind's gone blank. Okay, well, let's talk about the, because we talked about hitting the carbon negative position by 2030.
Right.
Now, on top of that, I'm sure most people are aware, you've also pledged to remove all of your historic carbon by 2050. Now, is that as hard as it sounds?
Well, yeah. I think that the biggest struggle we have is really counteracting growth, right? So that's the bigger challenge. 20% a year is what we, technology industry in general, kind of grows at. And so getting to absolute reductions, even while dealing with 20% a year growth, that's the bigger challenge. The overall amount of carbon reduction for, the 45 years is really commensurate with only a couple of years of what we're doing right now too. So we feel pretty strongly about our ability to get to that 2050 goal. Getting to the 2030 goal is the one we're really focused on right now, and concerned about, honestly too. And again, I can't say more enough. It's really about getting access to renewable energy. That solves the problem for everybody. And making sure that you're forward investing and sending signals to the market like we're doing with our power purchase agreement so that people know and can build things. I had an interesting discussion with a client of mine in Germany, one of the leading energy producers down there, EnBW, and there's the good and the bad of it. On the one hand, they're completely restructuring their business to provide renewable energy in Germany. So they're downscaling their fossil fuels, they're upscaling their renewable energy, and they're building out smart grids. The problem is everybody else is getting in the mix too. So they are now outbid by majors like BP and Total Energy for all of these windmill offshore power in the North Sea, and they're like, we can't even produce. So now they're having to look at how can we do some water power in Germany or other places. So it's also important, that's one of the discussions we have with governments, is that they need to be quicker in terms of making decisions and allotting those assets so that the companies that want to invest can do that right now. And there's a bit of a mismatch in the speed that both of those groups are doing.
I did remember my question now,
okay.
After my little senior moment. You were talking about global standards, and obviously Microsoft being a global company, global organization, how do you decide what a global acceptable level should be when you've got fingers in so many pies, to use a phrase, or this global footprint and different regulations and standards around the world that you're operating within? So do you find like a happy medium, or how do you set what the benchmark should be for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to us not only, as good corporate citizens, global citizens, but we also have to make bets on it for our software solutions, which is the interesting part about the business line that we're developing, because we're looking for the global standard, and that then becomes the data model that we're then going to develop. Some things like greenhouse gas protocol were obvious and have been around for decades, so that was not a hard thing to do. Then you take a look at things like the product carbon footprint standards, and that's a bit more complicated because companies are still in the process of thinking about it. So there we put together a large consortium with the World Business Council and Sustainable Development. So with many other large companies, we developed the Pathfinder framework that is based on a lot of other standards like the GLEC, and I can't even remember, the Global Logistics, whatever, and some of the ISO 140 standards. So we work together. But in areas that are still not that mature, we pick leading companies. So for water, for instance, there's no global standard on water management. I mean, there are some ISO standards, but nothing that's really used effectively on a global level. So we work with companies like Ecolab, which are a leader in this area about managing water not only for their own operations, but how they do it in their products. They sell to companies as cleaning solutions and so forth. So that's one area, and the same with waste too. I forget the company we're working with on our waste solution, but we're trying to lead. And then our idea will be at some point to take those learnings and then shift to a consortium approach when we can gather enough interest. But right now, when I'm talking to my clients, most of them are just worried about CSRD and carbon. They haven't thought about water and waste too much yet at this point.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? If we do, if you just put your hand up. Yeah, we've got a few. I thought we might. Can we get the microphone out, please? We'll just take a couple of questions, and then we are heading to a networking break. Okay. If you can just please keep your hands up. Okay, if we can just get a microphone over. If you just please state your name and where you're from, please.
Thank you. My name is Hedvig. I'm from Petrichor Planet. It's a sustainability consultancy. One of our core focuses is on cross-sector collaborations because like you're saying, a lot of companies today are looking at offsetting some of the footprint through partnerships rather than doing it all internally in their own scopes. I've found that to be extremely challenging for the companies to identify and manage these relationships and these partnerships effectively over time. I just want to get a bit of an understanding of how you're finding those partnerships, whether they are scalable to you and what challenges you're identifying in those types of cross-sector collaborations with governmental or non-governmental organizations.
Yeah, I think that, so they're challenging. I don't disagree with you too. I mean, if we look at maybe different types of them in terms of the standard setting ones, like the work that we did with the WCSD, that worked pretty well, actually. We had a strong partner with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development to kind of bring people together, and there was a common vision, so that was okay. Another one we worked out on a consortium that I can talk about is called Catena X. So there's this Gaia X framework, which is kind of a data model framework and harmonization within the globe. So I think it's more talked about in Europe than other places. Catena X was for the automotive industry and suppliers, which is a really big topic, right? Because Scope 3 is all about how do you get the data from your suppliers and how do you get it with quality and using the right formats. That's been challenging, and even with an industry that's relatively harmonized around, primarily the automotive and the battery industries too, but everybody tries to, focus on their own benefit. Working together with governments has. I don't have the experience in the United States in my role here, but in Germany there are lots of channels and discussions, and we work closely to give feedback to the European Union on terms of their legislative proposals. So there's a very formal role that we play there, in addition to sometimes guidance and questions at things. So that works relatively fluidly, but it's probably a more formal legislative role, if that helps.
Okay, just one more question from me, actually. So right now, today, what's the biggest challenge that you face?
Well, me personally, it's about it's about within the role is engaging clients to. It's about selling so much. What we're calling it at Microsoft right now, and even my peers in other companies, call it problem marketing. So there are 50,000 companies that need to implement CSRD as an example, right, and really embrace sustainable development and over the course of the next years and in a legal fashion. We probably have like 1,000 that have raised their hands. 6,000 need to do it already next year. So there's a huge gap in awareness. So all of us are sitting here and seem to understand all of these problems, but that's just not the case. I talk to CIOs and other functions and mention CSRD, carbon. They're like, oh, is that coming in January? Oh, we should probably think about that. So there's a huge gap in understanding. So that's why I'm not here to market so much for Microsoft. I'm very happy to be here and share what I can with my learnings with you guys. But it's really about we need to get out there. Let people know there's a lot of work that we still need to do. IPCC, we're missing the targets. It was a hot summer again. It'll probably be the hottest year. So there's still a lot of problems. There's still very little awareness. So there's a lot of talking, I think, that we need to do to get people engaged. Solutions from us, from all of here, I think we've got a lot of different solutions we can put to play right now. But companies need to make the step to invest in them and take action. And not all of them are aware yet.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna have to end it there, I'm afraid. But if anyone does have any more questions, if you use the event app Brella, which I'm sure Sean has registered for, you can ask him questions.
I have,
directly.
but I'm here too. So
exactly. Sean will be here. You can ask him questions in the session. But thank you for a great session. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.